3, and we are live. Welcome back to Building CareCo, episode something, where I sit...
15.
Episode 15, where I sit down with my co-founder, CTO Shloime once a week, and we chat about the week. Before we get into this past week, breaking news from the Trump administration. Trump just put out, a couple hours ago, he said, my next truth is going to be one of the most important posts ever. And then a couple hours later, he proceeded to post a long truth, I think I'm using that correctly, about that he's going to sign an executive order lowering drug prices across the country. That's going to lower drug prices between 30 and 80%. So, what does that mean? So, give us. You looked at a little bit more detail. What was kind of the details there? No?
I just noticed a detail that basically the idea was that certain drug companies are selling into the U.S. on one price, and you see this in a lot of things, but drugs is one example of this case where they sell one price here, and in other countries they'll sell it much cheaper, obviously, because people there cannot afford it. So you always try to find what's the price point that I put something at that I'll get the maximum margin. Basically, I'll get the maximum money profit because the amount of people that will now buy it multiplied by the margin. Because always, if you lower the price, you lower your margin, but then you can increase sales. Sales can make up for margin. So there's always like a sweet spot. And obviously, the poorer the country is, your sweet spot is going to be very low. So he's saying, basically, if you're selling drugs in the U.S., your price cannot exceed the cheapest price you sell to any country in the world. So that's not saying we're forcing you to do anything. It's not saying we're telling you how to price. There's no strong arming here. It's just saying you can choose. If you want to charge the same thing you charge here, sure, no problem. We charge the same thing in every other country in the world, which I think is a clever. I don't know the data, the distribution of how much drugs are typically being sold in the U.S. and how much are sold in other countries. But my guess is that whoever put this plan together probably did some research and realized that for these pharmaceuticals, probably they're making enough money. They're making more money from outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. that it's worth it for them to say, let us lose the U.S. margin as opposed to losing the other country's sales. Because if it was 80% of their money is coming from the U.S. and 20% is in other countries, they'll be like, okay, let's drop that instead of lowering the margin by 30 to 80%. So I'm guessing. I mean, I didn't do the research on this, but I don't think someone would do that without doing that research. So basically, it's just saying, people in the U.S., you're going to get the same price as everything else. And by the way, if you look at perfumes, there's so many industries that are so high margin, and they're tailored based on the country that it's being sold.
Interesting.
Because some people will just, in some countries,
this is what we'll pay.
And it's interesting because countries are the barriers. Because whenever you want to sell a product, you always run into the dilemma. I know I can sell to those people for this amount, but how many of those are there? But then if I lower it, also those people are not going to pay me that. So there's always a dilemma. And with digital stuff, you can play the trick of like features, and you could say, oh, enterprise, you get XYZ, but call us, we'll give you a special price.
Right.
So you can always kind of like create a different product, so to speak, that kind of targets that specific type of person that is willing to pay more by giving something that he needs and saying, that's how you differentiate. But with like goods, like with drugs or with perfumes, like how are you going to do that? You can't do that. You can say exclusive batch or whatever you can say, but it's not.
Right.
I don't think that really works. So with goods, it's always tricky. Like you always have to be fair. You want everybody to feel like they're getting the same price.
And also with the medications, you can't really do that.
Right. Exactly. So they usually do by country. Different countries are at different price, and this is interesting. I mean, I would like to see more about this, but it sounds like something pretty big, pretty huge.
Yeah, and so this obviously brought to mind Mark Cuban and his company Cost Plus Drugs, and obviously a friend of the pod on the Healthcare Trailblazers podcast, and we talked all about that on our episode. And so I quickly started looking through his tweets, and he's supportive, which I think good for him. He and Trump have obviously had their clashes in the past. Supportive, and he's saying that Trump did something similar with hospitals, but it actually makes a lot more sense through the lens that Mark Cuban comes from, because his whole thing is that, and he markets this very well. Like he got the messaging on point, which is that don't talk, like, doesn't matter the price, doesn't matter the rules, the regulations. The only thing that matters is transparency. And if you listen to what you said, it's like, if you can force them to, even just that point, and force them to be transparent about what are you selling this at other places, and then what are you selling here, and then that's step one in forcing them to create that parity.
Isn't
if you
it-
don't know what they're selling for because it's so convoluted, and you literally within the United States, you have no idea. Your contract and my contract could be two totally different contracts. We're buying the same drugs, and it's two completely different prices.
Is that the transparency he was alluding to, or he was
Yeah.
kind of trying to allude to his cost plus, where he's saying we're super transparent about what we're making off of you? Because that's a different take.
No, I think it's the same thing, because his whole thing is that the reason why, so his thing on my podcast, and hasn't just been on my podcast, he said this a bunch, is that he doesn't sell a product, he sells trust. That's what he sells, and he sells trust by transparency. So it's the same thing, that basically he's saying that he's successful because he shows you, this is exactly what I'm buying it for, this is the margin I'm putting on, this is my shipping cost, and that's what I'm selling it to you for. And then he's pushing for that level of transparency to be across the board, across all pricing, because when it comes to between the PBMs, which is the was it pharmacy benefit managers, benefit managers, and just in general, that whole industry is so convoluted. There's no transparency. No one has any idea what's going on. They're under NDAs. They can't say anything. They can't say what they're buying.
It's not a fundamentally
it's
free
ridiculous.
market, because the insurances are paying in, the pharmacies. I don't remember the details on that, but is that hot? I don't remember the details, but there's some sort of, like, usually you'll say, okay, it's a free market. Capitalism will play its role.
Right.
It'll equalize. Ultimately, if you're going to charge too much, a competitor is going to come in and bring and normalize things. But,
Right.
But with the pharmaceutical, there's like some, you can say, monopolistic elements there between the way how everything's set up.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting. I remember seeing this thing, how like capitalism always works, and it doesn't work basically when the government starts getting involved. Meaning, the second the government can very easily put their finger on the scale, which is probably the same thing here with this industry, where if they start giving rebates, or they start basically not rebates, if they start giving whatever, they start making deals and giving whether it's tax cuts, or there's different ways to move money around to say, for you guys, it'll be, if you do XYZ, then we'll give you this, we'll give you that, we'll give you breaks here, we'll give you breaks there, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, they have a monopoly. So
right, but I think there's smart ways how governments can do things and still leave the capitalistic, free market aspect of it is, and I think that's the approach Trump is trying to take with this, and also with tariffs. I'll get that in a second. Is there's two things that can happen with government getting involved. Either you start saying specifics, you start saying you're going to sell this for no more than this, or you're going to do X, Y, Z, or you're going to have to go through a process where now it's bureaucracy. We know what bureaucracy does to companies. So there's a lot of downside to it. How can you also keep the free market element, but also create constraints that benefit whatever you're trying to do, the American people as a whole, in this case? So I think, like, if you see with the CHIPS Act that the Biden passed, and it was a bipartisan act where both Republicans and Democrats agreed that the chips is a massive thing, that China cannot get access to our chips. Chips are the ones that are powering the GPUs that power AI and compute. So they made this CHIPS Act where they basically incentivized, they poured in a lot of money to companies to come and build here. But that you're paying specific companies. You're kind of manipulating the elements of what a free market works, where you want the best winner to come up. You don't want to choose a winner,
right?
Because that doesn't end up working. And we're already seeing the failures of that approach. Trump is taking a different approach. He's saying, no. You guys do a free market. I'm not going to mix it. I'm just going to put a tariff. So if you're going to try to bring things in from other countries, it's going to cost you a lot more. So you kind of keep, maybe I'm, mixing things up here a bit, and maybe I'm not super accurate, but I think the spirit of saying, let's keep a free market. Let's not choose people. Let's not inject money anywhere. Let's just say there's a barrier if you want to deal with other countries, and I think on the country level, it still allows a free market element. I think also here with the drugs, it's saying you can charge whatever you want, no problem. But just know that you can charge in other places in the world. And that basically means that people need to decide how they're going to, but you could still counter argue and say, by the way, the counter argument would be, but ultimately this means that drug companies' margins are going to shrink. Right, and I believe this is a legitimate argument. Ultimately, they're going to shrink. That means ultimately they're going to be incentivized to do what they're doing, possibly. Right. So
he alluded to that in his post where he talked about that they've always used but he kind of seemed to be demeaning that idea, not demeaning, but like discrediting that idea. He basically said, Trump basically said in this post that they've always claimed that the reason why the prices were so high in the U.S. was because of this, the initial cost of R&D, basically, in order to come up with these drugs. And even the COVID vaccine, that when the government was trying to put together the vaccine with these different companies, they were funding like 10 different vaccines with the hopes of one getting through, which is the right way to do it because it made the best person win. But they were funding all 9 of them, and so when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry and coming up with innovation in that space, they're doing tons and tons and tons of research with programs and projects that fail miserably and lose probably hundreds of millions and billions of dollars every year.
The average cost of getting a drug through to FDA approved? I think it's about $200 million. Imagine the research, the money you have to invest in a drug to get through all the way to the FDA approved stage. This was a couple of years ago.
That's if it works. I'm talking about all the ones that don't work that you still have to, in order to find the one that will work.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
someone has to pay for that ultimately.
And I think that's always been the argument.
And I don't think that's BS that they can say that. So his counter argument is like, oh, but you're charging less to other countries. That's true, because in every country you have to find that, like I was saying, you have to find that sweet spot. What's my maximum money that I'm going to make in that country? And the U.S. people have more money than in Iraq or wherever whatever country you're looking at. And therefore the sweet spot, and the same thing for perfumes and other things. These are capitalistic markets. So I think it's logical to me that in the U.S. it's always going to be higher and other countries going to be lower, because that's fair. I mean, maybe to his point, if you look at the balance sheet of these companies and you say, oh, I'm not aware of it. I'm not really, I'm not super familiar with this. But if you look theoretically and you say, oh, there's a 90% margin, then you're like, okay, they're going to be fine with a 60% margin.
Right.
And let's now force them to be in that place. So that's reasonable.
Okay, but the flip side to that is that, which I saw on the campaign trail, people were talking about this, which is like, 1 second, why essentially do the American people pay for all the innovation, but technology is not bound by borders. Technology and innovation is technology, so it just goes global. So we basically pay the cost of all the R&D here in order for the.
And in Europe, it's sold for less.
And then all that just makes its way over to Europe. And then
in Europe, it's sold for less.
Yeah, all these meds and everything.
In Europe, they're sold for less. Why is that? If they can get away with it here, why can they get away with it in Europe? That doesn't make sense to me. If you tell me in Africa it sells for less, I'll be like, duh.
This is brought to us by our friends at Perplexity.
U.S. drugs
not an ad.
2.7 times higher than other high-income countries.
What about Europe?
Brand name drugs cost 4 times more in the U.S. compared to Europe.
And are there restrictions in the U.S. compared to Europe? Do they release it first in the U.S. and then in Europe? What are their other?
It seems like it's because European countries negotiate their prices directly with the manufacturers.
Okay.
Also, a lot of them are single-payer countries, which means that the government is socialist healthcare, which means the government is the government that's it's one buyer. So you're dealing with one monopoly. This is our price. Right. We're not negotiating.
They're negotiating.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. That's a fair point. Like if Europe is paying less, so
if
he's essentially coming in and saying, now I'm going to negotiate for you guys.
Right, exactly.
I'm going to negotiate for the American people.
If we sat here in America and had the best healthcare system in the entire world, hands down, and it was the cheapest, best,
like the
and
total
everything,
opposite of that.
It's a total. And then we said, okay, whatever, but so we're good. The rest of the world let you guys enjoy, but we have a crappy healthcare system at the end of the day, and the costs are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the percentage of people that go bankrupt because of healthcare, but it's probably a massive amount. And we have problems here, and
it's messed up system. The whole system is messed up, and health insurance is also messed up. Like if you do the math of how much people pay for health insurance versus how much they're actually spending, the billing is ridiculous. Doesn't add up. So many things are broken here, and
but we aim to fix them one care coordinator conversation at a time. Brought to you by CareCo. Our friends at CareCo.
SmoothSegway.com.
SmoothSegway.com. Anyway, yeah. So going back just to the week for a moment, it was fun. Thursday I was in Philly. I spoke at the Population Health Colloquium, which is a word. I was featured faculty at the Jefferson College of Population Health, which I found humorous, being that I haven't gone to high school, let alone college. But it was really fun. A lot of good people. My friend David Nash is the one that put it together. He's the head of the school. whatever,
The dean?
or something. Yeah, but it's like, I don't know, past dean or something. I don't know. He's running stuff over there. So he put it together. Got to see a lot of good friends. Michael Dudley. It was great to see him and a couple other folks. So that was a lot of fun. I did not prep what I was going to say at all, at all. And then 10 minutes before I sat down, it was in an auditorium. So it was the speakers at the bottom. Also, I was expecting to be able to roam around, but apparently there was a bunch of people watching online. So I had to stand behind a podium, a microphone, a lecture. And then it was a lecture hall. So you had screen, and then you had these
Empty seats.
And it was, but it was it was probably a third full, but it was a stadium kind of, whatever, auditorium. So I spent the first 5 minutes literally forcing everyone to just come together to the bottom. So it's more fun that way. And I think we had a good time. Did a lot of back and forth with the crowd and got a lot of good questions. And it was fun, and it was easy because it was a 2-hour drive to Philly. So it wasn't
people from the space from.
Yeah, it's all population health. So it was all care coordination was definitely a lot of topic there.
Nice.
And the concepts that we talk about at CareCo really, really do resonate with people. This idea, I have yet to find someone. I've had one person in the probably over 1,000 executives that I've spoken with. And this executive had just gotten back from one of these futuristic conferences. And this was one serious executive that genuinely felt that agents, which we'll hear your thoughts on in a moment, that agents are going to take over fully, care coordination and everything.
Yeah.
One, every other person, investor, executive, healthcare professional, at all levels of the healthcare space, when I talk to them that I believe that you can't rip the human out of care coordination, because the whole point is changing patient outcomes, which in order to do that, you have to change their behavior. In order to do that, you have to build a relationship. And to build a relationship, you need empathy. That's my basic thesis. And every single person that I've come across just resonates and nodding their head. And yes, I absolutely agree with that. So I had that same experience there where I'm talking about these concepts and the whole room just yes, absolutely. This is spot on. So it's cool to kind of see that reaffirmation. But that actually segues nice. I know you've had some thoughts recently. You've had a bit of a thought around an insight, shall we, around agents. Go.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hot take. I hope I'm wrong, and I may well be wrong. But we shall do this. Agents, no go. Okay. So there's a lot of hype.
First of all, define an agent.
Okay, agentic is something that it kind of, prompt is one thing that you do. You ask a question, you get a response, boom, done. Agent is something that you can think of. I mean, many people can define it in different ways, but the way I think of it is something that's continuous and it's resourceful, and it allows the AI to reprompt itself. Basically, you tell it what's your end goal, and it can refine your question with itself or ask you back, and then maybe pull an API, try something on your behalf, and then does something you have if you have an agent that works for you, or you have an assistant. So that's the idea behind agents. And actually, I've noticed many, many months ago, probably close to a year ago, that in code, in building software, one of the most powerful thing is actually agentic, because if you're able to connect your AI to feedback loop with your code, where it doesn't just theoretically give you an idea, it also tests it out. It connects to your database, it sees the errors, it iterates over. If it's able to iterate, it's able to improve itself continuously, and then it can work exponentially and just improve your software. So I saw promise of that being incredible. And today we're at a stage where everything's queued up so beautifully for AI to be agent. I mean, we're still years away from seeing the full power of agents, and I think we're going to see a lot of beautiful things. But my only big concern here is that the intelligence of AI kind of hit a wall, kind of got stuck, and no one's really talking about this. Everybody's just excited about the hype of the latest, model is a bit smarter than the previous one, but they don't realize that the companies that made these models smarter, they put in disproportionate amount of resources to make that little jump. And you're talking about tens of billions of dollars or more per model. And the dream a couple of years ago was that there's a linear correlation between the data that you're processing per model and the intelligence that it gets. And everybody thought, based on the progress so far, we're going to reach AGI in a couple of years. But I think even a year ago, whenever this was with OpenAI, they were ready to, they were working on GPT-5. I think they called it Orion internally. And then they were super disappointed with the results of the AI. Like they trained this thing like with a lot more data than they did the previous one. It should have been like, order of magnitude greater than the previous one. Just like the jump from 3 to 4 or 2 to 3, but it just wasn't there, and they were just disappointed. So they couldn't release GPT-5, so they named it something else. And since then, we haven't seen GPT-5. Why? They spent way more money in this last year than they spent all the years before that, because we hit a wall. We hit a wall with AI. So yeah, there's new concept inference time.
Are you inferring that from the lack of GPT-5? Or are you saying, or have you seen something explicit that says that? Because like,
oh yeah, I've read
Sam Altman's tweets are still, they're still,
but there's less
hyping up.
There's less AGI in there, right?
Yeah,
there's less AGI.
But he's saying, I just saw some of the stuff working on internally. It's going to be absolutely mind blowing. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. It's going to be the same moment from GPT over again.
He has to. That's his specialty is his marketing, and they have to remain in the front. No matter wherever the state of AI is, OpenAI needs to stay in the front because that's their advantage. That's their advantage, and they need to keep it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to continue, saying that. But look, pay attention. He's not saying AGI anymore. He used to talk all day about AGI. It's gone because I think they came to a realization it's gone. I'm not saying AI is not going to get better, but major breakthroughs need to be done, and no one knows that there's a breakthrough coming because if you know that it's coming, it's not really a breakthrough, right? So all I'm saying is everybody is kind of extrapolating, and extrapolating is when you take a progress from the past and you say, based on that, what does the future look like? If you extrapolate the progress of AI until now, and naively you'll say, wow, okay, in 2 years from now, AI is going to be so smart. But the reality is that under the hood, we hit a wall with the scaling laws, as it's called. And we may not, I don't know, we may get there or we may not. We may find ourselves in a place where AI kind of gets stuck and these big companies are like, yeah, we can make a 10% smarter model, but why should we spend $300 billion in that right now? Instead of just making, because I feel there's still way underutilized area of AI is what we're doing. It's the kind of stuff that we're doing. Yeah, workflows, app, thinking how can I embed AI's current intelligence to making people's lives, better, smarter, more efficient. I think there's so much to unlock there. So I think at some point, unless they're still in that FOMO, let's win this race, let's always be in the head. But at some point, like a logical analysis will tell you, okay, we got to stop this thing with this 300 billion or whatever amount of investing because we can still unlock so much more if we create application level value with AI. So we may find ourselves in a place where that happens, and then like all these agentic tools that people built up that are, I think, anticipating for AI to be, because all the agentic stuff that are out there now, I think you still have hallucination problems, you still have lack of intelligence.
So going back to your analogy for coding, right? Because that seems pretty reasonable given where we are, and it's still not there yet, where it could just iterate upon itself instantaneously and read the error. Like that seems pretty
makes
doable,
a lot of mistakes. It makes so much mistakes. At some point that I'm like, sometimes I'm like starting with AI, I'm like, oh wow, this is I'm like so optimistic. Like
last week you were saying that
you can do this, and then it's like, okay, you're almost there, and then it's like, let's try again, and then I look at the clock and I'm like, if I would have done this, I would have been done with this like an hour ago. So yes, I think the intelligence is not there. At a certain level, it's there. If you're a junior developer or if you're a certain level, I'm sure AI could be a massive assist, but the stuff that I'm doing, and I think Shloime disagrees. I mean, you have a different. It's not disagreeing. You're saying that in your space, AI is actually a massive accelerator, even for real super experts. So there's still so much to unlock. But I think around the agentic world, you don't want an agent. And the problem with it, with an agent, when AI is not, when it's still hallucinating and is not super intelligent, is that, I'll just give a crazy example. You're going to have your grandmother being texted from your phone that you ruined your life because, you told the agent, make my day better. And then it went and it looked through your text and it figured out that the last time that you insinuated that you told someone something that made your day better. And then I'm just going on a rant here. And then it's going to be like, okay, who didn't you yet tell about, what you think about them? And then it's going to realize that you have some thoughts about your grandmother. She didn't treat you as good as your older brother. And then that's going to go and send her a message and say, oh, I just told your grandmother. And be like, what? Oh my, what did you do? So I'm just saying, like, agentic also.
In Silicon Valley when
what?
When he's like the dark goth guy, like the
on the
coder.
TV show?
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
So he builds an AI, Guilfoyle.
Guilfoyle, yeah.
Guilfoyle builds an AI and then gives it to Dinesh, and then Dinesh, and then builds one for Dinesh. But then he says it's only for us. It's only for you to use for one person. But then they ended up speaking to each other.
Oh,
and then it turned into. So the thing that you just described, like they built out that whole thing.
The power of agent is also the fact that it's what do you call it?
Autonomous.
Yeah, basically it's it's a multiplier. It's a force multiplier for the good of what you're planning on doing. Also, if it screws up, it's a force multiplier of the bad. So you can really find yourself in pretty bad situations. So I'm sure there are places where agents make sense, and I'm not thinking of all the scenarios, but I think to some degree there's a lot of anticipation that, and I think we do this too. I think that's a smart thing to do when you're working on AI. You have to anticipate. I think Sam Altman also said that you always have to build for the AI that's going to be there in a year or two. Don't build for the AI that's there now, because then you're going to be behind, and then you're going to be irrelevant.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of agentic tooling, a lot of stuff built on AI accelerating the way it is now and where it's going to be in 2 years. And there's a scenario that I think is possible is that it's just not going to get there, and then we're going to have all these tools that people are going to realize, like, it's not that helpful, it's not that great. It's AI just didn't get there, and then we're just going to kind of have a lot of dead stuff around. And by the way, in the internet.com bubble, there was also stories like that. There's so many websites going up. There's so many things, so much money invested. And most of the things that happened in those 10 years, from the early 90s to the end of the 90s, there's no memory of those. The great companies were built after that. There was a lot of search companies built then, but the good one, Google, was built after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the good stuff that were built were after that cycle of, like, try, fail, figure out, and I think the smart companies, those that don't depend on, like, being on the edge, they're taking it easier. Like, let's watch and see what works, and then we're gonna implement that. I mean, I don't know that anybody has luxury to wait 10 years, but
the other thing to keep in mind is that the upside is so tremendously great that I think after the 2022 bust of Gen AI and how quickly and the level of amazingness that brought out is going to be 1000x if they could reach proper agents and anywhere near AGI. And so I don't think they'll ever stop trying, and I don't think they'll ever be short of investment unless literally 50 years goes by and it just hit a brick wall. But I you know what I mean? Like, the world changed so much since 2022, just the way that we live our lives. I mean, everything. I use ChatGPT for everything, whether it's recipes, whether it's this, whether it's that. Yeah. You cook with, like, you figure out its strengths and weaknesses, obviously, but it's getting better and better and better. And sometimes it gets worse, but then it gets better and better and better. And it's changed the way we do anything. Like, there's pretty much nothing that I do these days without conferring or asking or, like, going back and forth just a little bit.
That's the big differentiator with the .com, is that the upside here is way bigger than anything the internet did at its time. Because if you can get that intelligence, it's like you're multiplying 1,000 humans, PhD level humans, that are just there at your finger snap, that are ready to work in the middle of the night, and you can scale, you can quadruple them at any point in time. So obviously that's a huge difference. So yeah, I agree. Like, there's always that fear of, like, if I don't hop onto this bus in the right time, someone else is going to fly and get much quicker, much faster.
I mean, Sam Altman, even though he was big in Silicon Valley, on the scale that he's at now, he came out of nowhere. Like, he's now on the same stage as, like, Satya and Tim Cook, and, like, he's like there. He's, like, with all the big boys, and he came out of nowhere.
I mean, you're not really. He's not $1 trillion company,
right? But
he's not a multi-product company. He's like a multi-cloud. Like, Microsoft and Google, they're so resilient because they have so many products that each one on its own is such a massive cash cow and success of its own. More Google than Microsoft.
I'm not saying necessarily from, like, an S&P perspective, so to speak, but, like, who's on that stage, for example, like
Right,
the
for
tech
sure.
leaders of today.
In a
is
way, him
there.
even more because
And he was
he's
nowhere
because
5
he's
years ago.
he's on the hottest product,
Right.
and he's like the leader of the hottest thing in the
Yeah.
hottest time ever. So yeah.
Yeah. The relationship between them and Microsoft is so curious. So
But I
interesting.
think he can fall just as quick also because it's a lot based on where the future takes them. Like it's all the eggs aren't kind of in one basket. That's
But
all.
you know what? A lot of people said every time, it's kind of like with Twitter, like there's been 17,000 Twitter killers, right? That have come out. And each time Twitter's still the mainstream place for people to go. And I feel like we've seen at this point probably 5 or 6 times where one of the incumbents came out with whether it was Gemini or this, that, and the other. And it was like, this is the ChatGPT killer. It's here. And the studies show that the things are on par and this and that. At the end of the day, when you look at the usage, it's hands down still OpenAI.
Why?
Like,
but why is
hands
that?
down.
But why is that?
What do you mean?
I'm saying the nuance is different because with Twitter, you can't recreate a network effects. Just like in theory, can someone create a better product than OpenAI? And if they have good enough marketing, will they get OpenAI's user?
You would expect that Google could have pulled it off. No, they're Google. How can they pull it off?
Google's not 100% focusing on OpenAI, on killing OpenAI. They're have so
pretty
many
heavy set on their Gemini thing, and it's pretty crappy. Like the experience is not great. I saw, who did I see? I think on Olimpod they were talking about this. Yeah, they were. They're talking about this on the Olimpod, one of the recent ones. How like if you ever try to use it, it's just it's such a bad user experience.
Because it's not their
they insert it in very awkward places. You notice, I don't know if you ever noticed, it's like the weirdest thing. If you know how they insert it into the search, so they insert it into all their products, they've inserted it in bad places. They insert it into search. There's no copy function or share function. So if you ask me a question, this has happened to me dozens of times. I go to Google, and then Gemini will give me the AI answer. Gemini will give me the AI answer. I can't do anything with it.
What do you mean?
There's no share button.
Oh.
You know how like Perplexity, I could just share the answer? It's like makes the most sense. I can't even copy it. I have to text copy the whole thing, which comes along with all the links and all the this and all that, whatever.
That's not their, I'm saying it's not their pure focus is to beat OpenAI. Like until now, they were saying, they were probably trying to say how much can you get away with the blue link search? Like maybe OpenAI is going to fail. Like they didn't know how good it's going to get and how good the models are going to get. I mean, they're also creating great models, but I don't think that's not their sheer focus. But I'm saying in theory, can someone create a bit better product than OpenAI? For sure. I mean, why not? Just like they can beat themselves. Someone else can beat
supposedly Grok is
there's
better,
nothing
but
nothing unique
the
about
usage
them.
is just not there.
OpenAI has a big advantage of branding and
That's what I'm saying.
and usage, but it's not a real moat. There's no switching costs. They're just always at the head.
You mentioned this last time. The memory is switching costs.
But they don't have real memory.
Yeah, they do. My memory's gotten really good.
You feel like it knows you, and that's why you want.
It knows me based on the information that I've put in it so far.
I mean memory to a point where it's like it knows everybody you text or emailed or phone conversation. It knows everything about your life.
Very integrated.
You just need to say what you're trying to do, and it's right away going to say, no, I'll figure it out for you. I know who to ask. I know who to contact. I know you want to talk to your mother about this. I know you want to talk to your brother about that. It's going to coordinate that. That's super powerful. And also, as you use it and it gets smarter, you're going to be like, okay, this knows me. This is like my assistant that I trained for 2 years.
Right.
But just remembering your chats, I mean, technically you can export it and upload it, I think. So, I don't know. I haven't used really ChatGPT that much. But I think fundamentally, like the whole Twitter thing, you brought Twitter. So I don't mean to like nitpick on that. But Twitter, you have to recreate the network effects, the culture. You can't force people to come to your product and create that vibe. You can't. There's nothing you can do. You can be the smartest, the richest person. If you can't do that, you can't do that. But if you can execute on a great product, you could technically beat OpenAI. So I think it's a bit different, but they're definitely, they're resilient and they're showing that he's very, he's smart. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
For sure. That's for sure.
Well, talking about workflows and come back to CareCo just for a moment. Pretty excited that we kicked out that Ambient listener this past week. So that's going into testing, but it's looking pretty strong. So now we're starting to work on text and video, but we already have the Ambient listener, which allows for in-person care in addition to telephonic. So if you are a home care agency or hospice nursing or anyone that kind of has maybe a smaller call center that does a lot of the coordinating and a lot of the, coordinating appointments or taking calls that come into the office from patients, but then let's say the majority of the work happens in person via nurses that are going out visiting docs. I'm hearing is a really good use case for this as well. Get in touch with us to try out these new features with CareCo because now you can use CareCo for in person. So it'll allow you to just hit record, and you'll capture that entire appointment from the interaction with the patient. You'll get your documentation, you'll get your tasks, you'll get provider messages, patient messages, just like you would with a phone call. But the added benefit is that all that goes back to the same central intelligent brain of CareCo, which then feeds also the office back home. So when that same patient calls, it takes all of that into context. So it's really, really powerful. We're going to continue to do that with text and video. But it's really cool. It's really fun to be back on offense.
I really feel like we're becoming a platform.
Yeah.
Like a communication, like until now it was a product. I mean, first it was more like a feature with the notes, remember?
Yeah.
With the notes. Then it became more of a product. Okay, we have a workflow tool, and now it's like a platform. It's like we have all communication. Like you're going to be able to do all sorts of communication. And I think that's amazing. It's exciting to see where this goes.
It's really fun.
It always makes me wonder, like, we did so much on the platform level. Like, do we always need to remain focused on care coordination and healthcare? Like, I mean, it's always probably bugs you, and like probably that thought comes up to you as well often.
Well, I think what we really are is the brain. That's what we're building. We're building the brain of the perfect care coordinator. That's who we were from day one, and we're slowly stepping into those shoes. And I think all of this is building towards that goal. And I think that once we have a complete brain that fully understands the intimate details of care coordination in all these different avenues, because each one is a little different. In person is going to be a little more different than telephonic. Telephonic's going to be different than video. Video is going to be different than text. But once we really have that down, I think that the opportunities are going to be limitless and will definitely break out beyond.
About to sidestep into other areas.
Yeah.
So all the stuff that we built out is so, like the phone and all the nuance. Like I was so involved in it, and it's like there's so much nuance and there's so much hair pulling. There's a lot of challenges. A lot of you know about all the telephony stuff, and there's so much. It's like once you pass, you're like, wow, we did a lot, and this is not some wake up one morning, vibe code some app, and you're call it a day. This is serious stuff. This is hard stuff. So. And this value is valuable to in any industry, sales industry. I mean, I don't know all the opportunities here, but so many industries. If you have a good phone system that's deeply integrated, that has all these features, it's like
I was showing it to an investor, and he's like, he's not in healthcare. He's like, I need this for my business. He's like, can you give it to me right now? He's like, I talk to clients 3-4 times a year. I don't remember what they said. I don't remember anything about them. I don't, but I have to give this very hyper-personalized experience. He's like, this would be amazing. We could probably turn it on for him, and it would probably get it right away, meaning whatever, maybe some little bit of tweaking, but not that much. Yeah.
What does this become? Like a CRM kind of thing? I'm trying to think, like, how do we have to, like, to your point, we have to remain focused. We have to do what we're doing. Yeah. It's always easy to say the grass is greener. I mean, that's, especially people with ADD, myself included.
So, where I'm going with this, we'll end it here. So thank you everyone for listening, and then we're going to record this, and maybe in a couple of years you'll get to see this. But so you can pause it here. But
we'll get back. We're done with that pod.
Yeah. Everything else you want to talk about?
No, I wanted Shloime maybe to share a bit about his thing with the AI and where you think. Like I was saying, from a coding perspective, it may not be the replacer of the top developers. I mean, I didn't say that, but I was alluding kind of to that. But you, a few days ago, when we had this conversation on chat, you were saying that no, in your area of video, photo editing, also he has the mic on. If they take the opportunity.
I didn't know until like 20 minutes ago. Otherwise,
you have to cue him up. You just set him up.
Yeah, all of a sudden I saw the red light. I'm like, wait a second.
And you were saying that in your space, it is a replacer. Like you can see how it's replacing, how it's doing, how is. What were you saying?
I don't know if I would say it's a replacer, but
I'm putting words in your mouth. Yeah,
you can do things that would normally take a team. I guess in that sense, it's a replacer. Like let's say that baby video. In order to do that, you would have to have some sort of digital artist render a baby version of Mendel and then animate it to the mouth. That could take weeks.
Yeah. Here's my question. Certain functions that are done today by high experts in the audio or in the video or photo, graphic, artistic industry, can those full things be replaced by current AI? Or is it like it's almost there, it's promising, it's probably going to be there in a year? Or is it already there? That's my question.
Well, I think certain things like image generation,
Image generation is there.
Yeah, I think
it can totally replace what an artist spent a few hours on. Bam, you do the right prompt, a few iterations, 20 minutes, you're done.
but you still need
That's
the
powerful.
expert to get to the results.
Yeah, you still need a person
Right.
to
You
prompt
need to go with taste.
Meaning,
but
put it this way:
but a
there's
creative
a person that gets up in the morning and decides and has this incredible vision for this amazing photograph of a woman spiraling, because I happen to see a video like this with lights all around her that looks like wings in a very specific salt, the salt things.
I have something to say about it afterwards.
In a typical creative agency, there's a creative director. He's that guy. He comes up with the vision, and then under him there's a designer, there's an animator, and he's like, okay, here's the idea. Then they go and they take it and they work on it. Then he comes back and he's like, they're the AI basically, and he's prompting them.
Right.
So that a lot of those people I think can be replaced.
But he is still using.
Instead of using a person to create it, he can just use the AI.
Right, but he's not replaceable yet.
No.
That's my point.
Taste. AI doesn't have taste.
But I think it works. By the way, I think it also works both ways. Like that designer could also take the job of the creative director now, because the designer also has more tools available instead of
but there's a certain talent there that the designer either does or does not have.
Skill in the vision.
Yeah.
But so that I don't think. Like if you
so I think in the creative world, that's interesting. That could be a total game changer. It could replace people, because we started talking about this because the CEO of Fiverr sent out a memo to his people saying, and I thought that was like hyperbolic, probably to turn a fire under the butt, to basically say, guys, let's get serious, like opportunistic. But he basically said, you wanna. I'm gonna look for it. Yeah. I want to say what he said.
He said it's coming for everyone's jobs, including mine.
Yeah.
He said if you're not an expert and a serious expert at your job, it's gonna take your job from you.
Oh, okay. So that I didn't realize. I like that's the first thing I thought was like, if you're a real expert, AI is not there yet. But you're saying in graphics it is quite there yet, which is
specifically, and it's gonna get there with video, because all video is just images.
Right.
Played. The thing with video is
it's not just images.
It needs to figure out which images to place after each other.
There's also physics. Like you can make a nice image, but a real image does not necessarily have to comply with physics, because you don't know who threw that bottle in the air and how it landed. It has nothing to do. But when you're showing a video, suddenly you have to match the real physics of the world. Like wind doesn't push a flag that way, or cars don't turn that way.
Right, but the question is, does it need to know physics, or could it just learn from
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can always connect it to physics engine. Games have physics engine. But that's crazy. What you just brought up about this thing, I thought, it's maybe totally off topic, but I was saying, I had an idea. I said, we have OpenAI released their image gen as an API. We always wanted to make it fun for care coordinators to take their photo. First of all, I think it could be fun because it's going to force them to put their photo. It makes the whole platform much more personable. You see the other person's photo. You also click on it. You're curious to see what photo they uploaded in terms of like what they did with AI. So we wanted to give it make it like a game where you can put up your photo, pick one of the 4 CareCo, character styles, whatever that you can pick. Maybe do a weekly thing. And I was just thinking, so I was thinking, maybe we should embark on this, maybe not. And then I thought, what if we can do like a weekly analytics thing where we send every care coordinator an email, like saying, like we have all the numbers, right? We know how many people they talk to and how many, like something like along the lines of, on behalf of the 150 people that you helped and cared for this week, we're saying thank you. We really appreciate it. Hope you have an amazing and relaxing weekend. And you generate it with AI, with them like standing, like you do like some theme. Let's say there's some warrior in the Roman times that are like standing, and you see like 150 soldiers or people standing around them, or like.
I would love that. And that card is shareable.
Yeah. So I don't know about the graphics part of it. I mean, you can do like something where you show the physical amount of people displayed as people around a central person, which is them, because you have their image, and then you make them into something. Maybe it's some cartoon or some sci-fi movie based. I don't know.
I don't know how long it would take to do that, but we've talked about this for a long time, making like a weekly recap kind of thing. And it could be at the management level, at the user level, et cetera, et cetera. It ties into our care coach, which we'll get to eventually. It's super powerful. Yeah. And then you basically make these cards that are all shareable, kind of like the Spotify. We've talked about the Spotify Wrapped kind of concept.
And we know, I mean, me from doing, debugging calls and having to listen to some calls, these people, the care coordinators, they have it rough. They're underappreciated. Like 100%. They talk to people don't always talk to them very nicely. They're time constrained. They're underpaid. Like if we can make them feel good about what they're doing because they're doing something that's amazing, I think that's a great opportunity. I think it's good for it's the right thing to do, but I think it's also going to come to pay us back in the long term. So doing it fun using AI could be like super cool.
Yeah. All right. Till next time, this was us.
Yes.
Cheers.
You want to say something off camera?